Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Peter.
Ready for this?
Ready.
Right. So, onto the subject of money. I made a show recently with Jeff Snyder, which was interesting because he made me think about some things I hadn't thought about before. A lot of people enjoyed the show. Some people criticized the show. I did a follow-up with Lynn Alden where we got into some of the topics that we discussed. But you also want to talk about this. Did you? So you listened to the show?
I did.
Yeah.
I did, yes.
Okay. So a lot of people like Jeff and bring up the Eurodollar was something like I've heard of, but never even, I've not got into it. I'm not a finance guy like you do. I just ask people questions about it.
Can you give me a definition
of
right
the
now?
Eurodollar?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, the Eurodollar, what I thought it was, because I've heard about it. Like I've heard it in reference on the news and stuff. When people talked about the Eurodollar, in my head, I was like, oh, is that just like the exchange rate? And is that exchange rate used for a purpose or something? Now, based on my conversation with Jeff, the Eurodollar seems to me just like a made-up money. A group of people have made up a money, and they get to use it and inflate it as they choose. It just that to me, that's what I got out of it with Jeff. But you tell me.
Yeah, so we can definitely be much more specific than that.
Please.
And I thought it was funny. Like, I know I like Jeff. I like him a lot. I
Yeah.
listened to his show. I know this is kind of his shtick to make it seem like, we got to drill down on some of these things, but also some of the conventional definitions might not be correct. But I thought it was just kind of funny because in your show, I heard two types of, I told this to Danny as well before the show, like this sort of repeated twice, this theme. You were like, so what is money? And he was like, I don't know.
Nobody knows.
And then you're like, so what is the Eurodollar? It's like, I don't know. And I get it. I understand it, why he's saying those things. And there's some complexity there. But this is one of the things I like to do on my show and with the research that I've done, which we talked about it actually last time I was on your show a few years ago, this basic money research, which we'll talk about here. But basically, the Eurodollar is so there are definitions to money. Very specific definitions to money, tried and true and tested. And there's a very specific definition to the Eurodollar. So I guess we can start with the Eurodollar, but let's not go into that. Let's go into money first. So the Eurodollar is very simply any bank that offers a dollar-denominated deposit to anyone, and that bank is outside the jurisdiction of the Federal Reserve.
Oh, so I actually have Eurodollars.
Yeah, if you have dollars in your bank account and your bank is not in the United States or it's not a foreign branch of a United States bank, you have a Eurodollar.
Yeah, so my business account, I found out quite by mistake that I have a dollar account because one of my sponsors, my sponsors, a lot of them in America, it appears that some are paying me in pounds, but some are paying me in dollars. But I didn't know both were happening. Obviously, the decision their end is whether it comes into my account as pounds and dollars.
Yeah.
But one of the sponsors said they'd paid, and I was like, "You haven't paid." I'm like looking at my account. You've not. They're like, "I've paid," and I was like, "I'm telling you, you've not paid." So I ended up phoning up the bank, and they're like, "Oh no, it's in your dollar account." I was like, "What?" So it turns out I had a dollar account. It was sat there. By the way, which with the pound crashing against the dollar was a good decision. I didn't find it, but I didn't realize. So those are Eurodollars.
Yeah, and there is such a thing called euro sterling. The euro is a confusing term. It happened basically post World War II, around the Marshall Plan. A lot of it was when Europe was being rebuilt after World War II, primarily Western Europe. A lot of these people that were involved, contractors and whatnot, they actually figured out it was better to get dollars. It's a stronger currency back then against most currencies. So that's why it started to be called a Eurodollar. But it was dollars that were worked and transacted throughout the economy, through trade, through Europe, but they were not inside of Federal Reserve banks or US-based banks. So that's a Eurodollar. But there's also Euro sterling, which is confusing because you might, obviously Britain is in Europe, kind of after Brexit, right? But it's basically a foreign denominated currency. So sterling would be any quid, any sterling that, well, I guess quid is cash, isn't it, right? Be any sterling denominated deposit that you held outside of a UK official bank governed by the Bank of England. So that's what it means. But I would say even before, let's definitely do Eurodollars.
Are they euros?
Yeah, euros. There are euros, which is so. I was actually going to say that. I forgot already. But there are euros as well. And the Panama Papers revealed a lot of that, the Paradise Papers, Panama Papers. But I think more interesting, and what I think is important to talk to you about with some of this stuff, is backing up from that, and this is what I try to do on the show as well, and make a distinction between some of this stuff and more talk about money. I know it's a very basic thing. Bitcoiners do it all the time. We like to philosophize about it. But there is as well a very tried and true definition of money, which we should make sure we understand. So money is an economic good that is a generally accepted medium of exchange. That is the definition of money. These other terms, the two main characteristics, store of value and unit of account, they actually fall away when we talk about what money is. They are there, but they're not as interesting. The X factor of money is it's a generally accepted medium of exchange. That is money. Now, one of the misconceptions about money, when we talk about there's ones that all sorts of economic schools use, which has never really been proven out. David Graeber is the one he had this debt theory of money. He's since passed away, but he had this thing called the credit theory of money. He was a chartalist. He basically had the idea that money was always sort of whatever the state defined it as for taxes, legal tender, whatever. But anything else is just credit. And we'll talk about credit in a second. But this idea, and you hear the Austrians use it a lot. Many economists use it. It's like this sort of theoretical idea that we had economies where we are trading with barter, and then barter, we have this double coincidence once where barter becomes too difficult, and so then we settle on something that is money, because barter is just too, it's cumbersome, right? Like I have 2 cows, you have 1 pig, whatever. How do we value that in exchange? So we find this thing called money that evolves. It's actually less true than most would have you believe. And this is where I want to get to credit, because credit is always going to be throughout this discussion, and it always is in the Bitcoin discussion as well. Money, the generally accepted medium of exchange, is an entirely distinct concept from credit. They definitely do overlap, or they can overlap, but then you have to define your terms on what are the things that overlap and what doesn't. One of the things that I find interesting is a lot of Austrians, they like Mises and Hayek and Rothbard. These are very hard money economists. They like gold. Gold is absolutely money in the history of man and civilization. But credit came way before. Credit is this always and everywhere phenomenon. There's a book which a lot of Austrians don't even know, Sidney Homer's The History of Interest Rates. I highly recommend it if you really want to get into it. He goes into this stuff. Covers interest rates back to like Mesopotamia and, Assyria and all of these just ancient lands, ancient Israel, all of these, Egypt, all of these different epochs. And it's a very, very interesting book. But he makes the point, which is very important, is that credit needs no money. It needs no barter. It needs no commodity. It needs no intermediary. Credit actually needs nothing, and it can work. And you might wonder, how can that happen? Well, my typical example when I'm giving talks about this or lectures, I'm on podcasts a lot, you just think of 2 cavemen in the most primitive of societies. One says, I'll make the fire today. You make the fire tomorrow, right? Very simple, but we can immediately get something that we want today by involving ourselves in a credit transaction, right? We are borrowing, someone else's time today. If you don't want to spend the time making the fire today, you make the fire today, I'll make it tomorrow, right? And that's what credit is. And that is actually the thing that has allowed civilization to grow well in excess of money. Credit it's within us. It's like a promise. It's always there. I know it's kind of cliche. We talk about this a lot at Bitcoin or whatever, but you have to understand that credit is way, way, way deeper in our, in humanity and in society than money. Okay, so money really comes into play only in 2 situations, all right? And money, and this is now talking about base money, which I focus on, and so it's kind of the opposite of what Jeff focuses on is the Eurodollar. But base money, there were sort of 2 situations where that arose. And the reason why you would need that is because basically civilization was progressing. There was, as things progress, we need something a little bit more than primitive credit. And primitive credit, what's a sign of that is basically we all know each other. We know each other, we can hold each other accountable to it, we can make good on it. And this goes down to families even, right? Like, I mean, talking about, relationships among siblings. I mean, how often can we think about that from the childhood? Like, you made a deal, I'll do the dishes today, I'll do the dishes for a week if I can do this one thing, right? Like, it really is like so fundamental to the way that we get what we want and the way we kind of scale ourselves at a primitive level. But why would we need money at a non-primitive level as society grows? Two reasons. The first, as Nick Szabo has done a lot of diligent work on, was as kind of as a dowry. It's just passing wealth on from one generation to the next. And shells were a big part of that. So cowrie shells in Africa, wampum in North America. It's the quahog is the name of that special town in our favorite show. But so the quahog, wampum, these things, they actually kind of made it as money. And they were used, gold and silver were also used during these ancient times, but shells were much more prevalent, and that allowed, it was, whether they're for ornamental reasons or people started to, it became a generally accepted medium of exchange where you could go outside of your tribe, you could be a little bit more advanced, you go outside of your community, and it might still be accepted as some value. You stored some value and moved. So it is the store of value function, but that's not the interesting thing is it's generally accepted. That's still the X factor with money. It's always the X factor is it's a generally accepted medium of exchange. And people forget those two words, generally accepted. They just think medium of exchange, dollar, whatever this, it's the reason. There's a very precise reason why generally accepted medium of exchange is used. And so the dowry is one reason. Nick Szabo writes very, very well on this, done a lot of good research, original research on this. And then the second one is, which pretty much, of course, gold and silver were used before this as money, but it showed the prowess on the world stage, i.e. being a generally accepted medium of exchange, gold and silver, also copper, bronze alloys, and almost shells. Shells didn't quite make it, like they did around the Horn of Africa for traders and stuff, and they did in wampum in the United States, around different parts of the United States. The reason that you would need it is if you were a trader and you were going from one community to the next. And you're going off the next morning. You're never going to see these people again. That's why you need money. You can still do this double coincidence of wants, you can barter and all the rest, but it's more important than being some sort of effective medium exchange. It's important that you can take it away, and where you take it, it will also be a generally accepted medium of exchange. So that's where gold and silver really started to shine in the medieval periods, the Renaissance periods, particularly the Renaissance, where you could be a East Indian spice trader or West Indian rum trader, and wherever you're going back after the season ends, you're going back to Europe, that gold and silver is good. And Spanish obviously knew that silver was good when they were plundering South America, and this war has been fought over gold and silver and all the rest. So there's two reasons. One is like the dowry, the family heirloom, passing it on through the generations. And the second one is fucking off after you do the deal and you know that where you take that money, it's going to be good. So those are the traditional needs for a medium of exchange, and that's why gold and silver have arose. And then this also, the Austrians call it commodity money. But what it is economically, which is another term we can talk about, and you can ask questions at this point, I guess, but that's called base money or basic money or the monetary base.